Let us turn to Dr. Corinne Post to begin, please.
Yes, hello and welcome. I'm Corinne Post, and I'm a professor in the management department here at Lehigh University. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this Lehigh University and International Labor Organizations panel discussion promoting diversity and inclusion of business advantage. We have people from all over the world joining us today, so it's really going to be a global discussion on the business advantage of diversity and inclusion. And Lehigh also has a strong partnership with the United Nations. So Lehigh is in fact the 6th university in the world to attain a UN NGO accreditation all the way back in 2004. In 2008, we established the first UN Youth Representative programs, and more than 100 Lehigh students have served as the voice of NGOs around the world. Many have in fact also made presentations at the UN. When there's not a global pandemic going on, we take students, faculty, and even staff to the UN almost every week, often several times a week. And indeed, we've taken over 15,000 students, faculty, and staff to the UN over the years since our partnership began. The partnership between Lehigh and the ILO has also been active for nearly a decade with a variety of layers of collaboration. Last year in April, we hosted the ILO's 100th anniversary celebration and conference. And today's presentation is one of a series of similar events that we're hosting this fall. So for now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Ms. Gloria Blackwell, Senior Vice President, Fellowships and Programs from the American Association of University Women, who will moderate our panel today. Ms. Blackwell, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Post, for that lovely introduction to the panel. It is my pleasure to be here this afternoon to moderate this panel. The American Association of University Women has had a really great relationship with Lehigh University, and I'm really proud that your youth representative program has been of such value to our organization. And we currently have 2 of your students who are serving as AAUW's youth representatives at the United Nations. So this afternoon, I have the pleasure to moderate this very, very important panel with a distinguished panel of experts. First, I'd like to provide an introduction to the individuals who will be bringing us our content today. We have Dr. Leora Eisenstadt. She is an associate professor of legal studies at the Fox School of Business at Temple University and is the founder and director of the Center for Ethics, Diversity, and Workplace Culture. She's an expert on race and sex discrimination, employment law, sexual harassment, retaliation, and whistleblowing. Her publications include Intent and Liability in Employment Discrimination, Fluid Identity Discrimination, The N-Word at Work, Contextualizing Language in the Workplace, and Whistleblowers Need Not Apply. Eisenstadt received her LLM from Temple University, her JD from New York University School of Law, and her BA from Yale University. She is also the recipient of numerous awards for her research, including the Virginia Maurer Distinguished Ethics Paper Award, the Rouse Heber Memorial Award for Outstanding American Business Law Journal Article, and is a 3-time winner of the Jackson Lewis Outstanding Employment Law Paper Award. Next up, we have Dr. Donald Outing. He is Lehigh University's first Vice President for Equity and Community. In this role, he leads institutional efforts to advance its work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Outing reports directly to the Lehigh president and is the senior administrator responsible for developing and implementing a comprehensive plan to enhance and continue to build on the university's efforts. Prior to his appointment at Lehigh, Dr. Outing served as the Chief Diversity Officer at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. In that role, he served as the Academy's senior leader in coordinating efforts to create a more diverse and inclusive environment and developed and implemented USMA's first diversity and inclusion plan. Before serving as West Point's Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Outing was an Academy and Associate Professor in the Department of Mathematical Sciences and the founding director for the Center for Leadership and Diversity in STEM at West Point. In that role, he conceived and implemented an innovative STEM outreach strategy directed at middle school students that impacted more than 10,000 students nationwide. Our third panelist is Mr. Gurchathan Sandhu. Born to Indian working-class migrant parents in the UK, Gurchathan Nanu Sandhu, pronouns he, his, and they, them, is a non-discrimination program support officer at the International Labor Organization's Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work branch. Alongside his BA in economics and master's in development economics, his passion for social justice has led him to focus his efforts on promoting the principle of non-discrimination in employment and occupation. Over the past 12 years, Gurchathan has built his expertise and knowledge on promoting social justice through quality, decent, and inclusive work for all, in particular to enhance LGBTIQ+ rights at work and economic inclusion. He also finds the time to volunteer as president for UN Globe, the group representing LGBTIQ+ staff in the UN system. As its president, Gurchathan works to ensure the voice and rights of LGBTIQ+ staff are represented in UN policies and procedures. He also serves as committee member of International Family Equality Day NGO, advising on non-discrimination based on family status in the world of work, and is a fellow of the Salzburg Global LGBT Forum. In 2018 and 2019, he was listed as the top 30 outstanding role model in the public sector. Welcome our panelists for this afternoon's meeting. Each of our panelists will now provide expert presentations about the work that they are doing around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We'll start with Leora, Associate Professor at the Department of Legal Studies, Fox School of Business, Temple University, and Director of the Center for Ethics, Diversity, and Workplace Culture. Dr. Eisenstadt will talk to us about the importance of including diversity, equity, inclusion, and workplace culture in a business school curriculum, and the overall importance of a workforce that understands these critical ideas. Welcome, Leora.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, and it's great to be here with all of you from all of these various countries around the world. It's really awesome. And thank you to the ILO for inviting me to participate. I got to work with the ILO last year. We also held one of the centennial celebrations at Temple University last year, and it was a fantastic event. And so I'm really grateful to continue working together. So I wanted to talk, as Gloria said, about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion to businesses, and then also why it's important to include it in the in business school curriculums. I really think, sorry, I'm just minimizing my screen here. I want to describe to you what we're doing at Temple now in the creation of this new center, and we're calling it the Center for Ethics, Diversity, and Workplace Culture. And we plan for it to be sort of a hub for research, dialogue, and innovation. We want it to be a place where we can collaborate between industry, government, and academia. We can come together to talk about best practices, how to harness diversifying workforces, how to build healthy, ethical workplace cultures, and really a space to teach our students how to have difficult conversations about race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and so on in the workplace, because they're going to have them eventually when they get there, right? So let me give you sort of a little bit of a backstory. I come to this world through the lens of employment law. I'm an employment lawyer by training. I practiced in that area. I research in that area. I teach. My focus, as Gloria mentioned, is on race and sex discrimination. Sorry, tickle. Harassment, retaliation, whistleblowing. So I spend all of my time thinking about those issues. But in the wake of the #MeToo movement, I looked around and saw companies ignoring or indifferent to diversity, harassment, culture, implicit bias, really to their detriment. So companies like Uber and other tech companies, media companies, numerous consumer brands Even just 2 days ago, I saw reports that Goldman Sachs was burying reports of sexual harassment, right? So this is ongoing. And all it takes now in this global world that we live in is a tweet or a blog post that goes viral, right? For the previously internal workplace culture issues to suddenly affect brand reputation and company bottom lines, right? And the events of spring 2020 and the renewed energy of the Black Lives Matter movement means that there is new urgency, I think, to these issues. It's not a new issue, right? The movement did not raise new issues. It brought urgency to existing issues. And it forced companies to pay attention in a way that they hadn't been before. So platitudes are no longer sufficient. Employees want to see action. I heard reports recently about over 200 employees at Adidas, right? At Adidas headquarters, who have been protesting daily, right? Saying to the company, there is a disconnect between what the brand puts out there, right? The pictures of people who are wearing our clothing and what the brand is doing internally to those of us who work here, right? They are demanding action, not simply a statement from the company. And this should matter to businesses. Why, right? There are a whole host of reasons why diversity, equity, and inclusion should matter. So inattention to these issues can cause a lot of negative effects. Very basically, it impacts worker health. The stress of having to deal with daily discrimination, microaggressions, fear of retaliation, harassment, that stress manifests itself physically and emotionally. And if employers don't care about that because it's the right thing to do, they should care about it because it's expensive, right? It's going to affect you from a workers' compensation perspective, from a health insurance perspective, right? Your worker health matters. It also affects retention and worker loyalty. The costs of attrition are enormous. It is very expensive to lose employees and have to rehire and retrain, right? So if you have not created a culture in which employees feel comfortable and feel like they want to stay and participate in that culture, they're going to leave. Millennials are notoriously not loyal to a company for a very long time, right? I think we're down to an average of 2 years at a company. So if you are not doing your best, this is not 1950 anymore, where you went to work for a company and you stayed there for 25 years. If you are not working hard to make sure that your employees feel included, they're going to leave, and that's expensive. It can impair productivity and innovation. The research is clear that when employees work in a climate that does not feel inclusive, when they deal with harassment or fear of retaliation, the psychic burden is enormous, and that makes it much more difficult to be creative and innovative in your work. 2 more. It damages brand reputation, right? Consumer behavior is impacted by how consumers see companies behave in this space. There were calls to boycott Uber over the harassment scandals, over the current treatment of drivers, right? People vote with their wallets, so you don't want to be on the wrong end of that. And lastly, and I think probably most basically and importantly, you miss out on talent and important contributions. If you don't build a diverse team, it can lead to a really myopic view. If you don't have diverse voices in the room, you won't market to a broad audience. You won't make decisions that take into account how they impact the workforce or society as a whole. You will miss things, right? If you are just replicating yourself and not thinking about talent in new ways, you will miss out on the experiences, the views, the ideas that are different from your own that will lead to success, right? So it's clear there are so many business advantages. It is costly to ignore diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the crises that result if you do that are expensive also. It seems obvious then that this should be an important focus of a business school curriculum. Unfortunately, it's been my experience that unless you have a faculty member or members who are focused on these issues, as it appears Lehigh does, a lot of business schools don't focus on these issues. And being a lawyer and coming through the legal profession, look, law schools do teach these issues because it's on the bar exam and because the lawyers are called in when there's a crisis moment, when there's an incident, when there's a lawsuit filed, when there's a charge, when a blog post goes viral, they call in the lawyers. But when I joined the business school at Temple, I realized that we are missing an opportunity to educate the future business leaders and managers who will actually encounter these issues on a daily basis and who have the power to create healthy, inclusive workplace cultures to avoid those crisis moments, right? To avoid the attrition, to avoid missing talent. So, and we need to teach our students how to have these difficult conversations because, you know, surely they will have them in the workplace. We are humans that work in workplaces, right? We bring with us all of our identities and experiences and emotions, and we don't leave them at the door. So if you are not capable of having difficult conversations, you are going to fail as a manager, right? Business students are not often the activists. Sometimes they are, but in my experience, these issues tend to be new for them. So we need to bring the issues to them because they will encounter them eventually. They're just not seeking them out yet. My conversations with executives in building an advisory board to create this center have really affirmed all of this. And I just want to end by telling you about some of the reactions I've heard when I discuss the center plans. A former senior executive at Coca-Cola told me he wished this was part of the curriculum when he went through the business school. He was maybe 2 or 3 years out into his management position, an employee came to him to report sexual harassment by another manager. And he felt at a complete loss because he had had no training in how to handle that conversation. I've spoken to D&I executives who are deeply committed to bringing the discussion of equity and systemic racism and implicit bias into their workplace, but they encounter resistance from higher ups, right? Who don't get it or don't want to get it. And if you don't have buy-in from the senior executives, you cannot change the culture, right? I've spoken to HR or talent management executives who are desperate for training materials. They know their employees need help, but they don't know where to look for information. And I've spoken to senior D&I executives who are doing this really well and really strategically building a department or a program, but they're spending so much time teaching other D&I professionals at other companies in sort of a one-to-one mentoring role that they have no time to do their own work. And they would love to create and distribute materials more broadly. There's a feeling that this is a discipline without a real home. It needs an academic home. So what will our center do? We will do what both centers do. We'll host conferences and workshops and speaker series, undergraduate experiential learning programs, professional training programs, networking opportunities. We're going to review our curriculum, and we're also going to clean our own house, review our faculty and staff hiring procedures to diversify our population, and review our recruitment. And so far, we have an ambitious agenda, but we're already having conversations with executives at Comcast, Netflix, Walmart, Nike, Ernst & Young, Lincoln Financial, Facebook, and others. So I am optimistic that, that we are going to be including this and in our curriculum, in our school, and really signaling our values to the community at large. And I'll stop there, and I'm hopeful that in the Q&A we can talk more about sort of the differences between diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why those are important.
Thank you so much, Leora. And I think the center that you are spearheading, it's really important because the sort of connection between business and higher ed is really important when you think about the actual costs, as you have outlined, of not being an inclusive institution at any level, and what the cost does not only to the company but also to the individuals who are employed with that company. Thank you. And that having this information available to future business leaders is really important when we're talking about changing the face of workplace culture. It has to start before they enter into the workplace. So next we have Dr. Donald Outing, the Vice President for Equity and Community at Lehigh University. Welcome, Donald, and we're looking forward to your information on the efforts that Lehigh is working on for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Gloria. And I'd like to first say thank you to ILO for inviting me to be a part of this very distinguished panel. And thank you to everyone that is present today. And I just want to take an opportunity first to acknowledge that we here at Lehigh, we traditionally are often gather on the traditional lands of the Lenape people, past and present. And I want to honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it through the generations. And this calls for us all to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land and inhabit it as well. Um, I just want to say that, start off by saying that I arrived here at Lehigh University on February 1st, 2017. And at that time, my primary focus was developing and implementing a strategic plan to advance the diversity, equity, and inclusion work and aspirations that were connected to our overall strategic goals for the university. At this time, it was our path to prominence, that was driving a lot of the work that we were doing. Spent a great deal of time working with the community through campus-wide engagements in developing the strategic plan. And the plan was fully developed and ready to, I'll say, publish this past March and April. Very comprehensive plan, but because of the COVID-19, we paused on the publication of it. And then following or in the wake of the deaths of Jacob Blake, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, there was a change, if you will, a change in our society, a call, a demand for action, for social justice. And Lehigh University was not immune to what was happening throughout our society. So over several months, we began discussing and working on a plan regarding how to understand, acknowledge, and address stakeholder calls for action around social justice. Those calls for actions demanded that we take a more systemic approach to diversity, inclusion, and equity. And today, what I'm going to be talking to you about is how we pivoted, if you will, to a strategic level approach to enhance our ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Lehigh. So for Lehigh, we believe that for us to be truly a progressive leader or continue to be a progressive leader in the diversity, inclusion, and equity space, we had to be willing to apply a systems-based approach to our DI&E strategic plan. And this is not just at Lehigh. This call to take a more systemic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that many of, or a great number of our higher education institutions are being called upon to do. And so while racial justice needs to be highlighted in this approach, systemic DI&E really goes beyond just racial justice. And it really touches every facet of inclusion across all walks of life, elements of humanity. And this systemic approach recognizes and then reimagines, if you will, the structures and the systems that perpetuate these inequities. Up until this point, I'll say, a lot of the work that we've been involved in could be described as, in some respects, more transactional in nature. And this demand now that we remove the barriers that have been creating these inequities has really caused a lot of practitioners as well as leaders in higher education to pivot. So this past summer, many of us were exposed to the scholarly work, language, and methodology of anti-racism as a practice. It's a language and methodology that provides a roadmap for addressing systemic diversity, inclusion, and equity. And while the focus has been on race, the premise applies, as I previously stated, to all diversity, inclusion, and equity efforts. We had the privilege of having Professor Ibram X. Kendi here this past October last year, here speaking. And when he during his presentation, one of the things he argues is that racism is systemic because it's intertwined both consciously and unconsciously in the fiber and foundation of just about every organization, in every community, in every nation, and manifesting through these written and unwritten beliefs, laws, rules, procedures, processes, regulations, and guidelines that govern our people. And his assertion is shared by many sociological, psychological, and historical scholars. This work actually goes back almost 40 years ago when Judith Katz introduced it in her work, White Awareness, as she provided this framework for anti-racism. Now, the construct can be and should be applied to our broader efforts to become towards inclusive excellence. They can lead to difficult conversations, as which I've found. These conversations really have been uncomfortable with this systems approach because we're really challenging a number of people for the first time to confront the systemic racism, the systemic sexism, the systemic xenophobia that exists throughout our organization. You know, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, sexism, many of the scholars will argue that these things cannot be reversed, and instead it promotes this redefinition through the lens of anti-racism. So we believe here at Lehigh that if we want to truly be transformational in our approach, we have to apply these principles to our system. So what this has required for us is to really develop a broad, bold strategy that challenges the historical structures, systems, processes, and policies. So where we are now, as a result of all of that, is we have now pivoted. And as I stated before, this diversity, inclusion, and equity strategic plan that was all ready to be published, we are now revisiting it. We have a task force that is working on incorporating anti-racist language and processes into our diversity, inclusion, and equity plan. Furthermore, we are standing up a number of committees and task forces to really do a comprehensive review of our policies, processes, and procedures to determine where are those obstacles to true equity. Do they exist within our Lehigh University Police Department? So we're going to review that. Do they exist within our tenure and promotion processes and procedures within our faculty? So our faculty senate will be looking at that in committee and studying that. Do they exist in our hiring policies? But this has really, this is a really big pivot from a very transactional approach of addressing individual behaviors within the system and within the organization, and really looking at us as an institution. What role are we playing in continuing to promote barriers to equity across gender, race, sexual orientation, religious identities, and other aspects of identity that have been underserved throughout our society. So I will stop there, and hopefully we have a chance to go into more detail during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Donald, for providing us with that great information about what Lehigh is doing to focus, not just on the individual, but also looking at the institution's role and how the institution can play a role in breaking down the systemic barriers that exist, and looking at the intersections of race and gender and sexual orientation and religion, and making it less transactional and pivoting to that systems-based approach. Next, we will have Nanu, who will talk to us, provide us some information on what D&I means in practice and what tools and legal frameworks the ILO has developed to address the wide range of issues under that particular banner. Nanu is the non-discrimination specialist in the Fundamentals, Principles, and Rights at Work branch at ILO. Welcome, Nanu.
Thank you very much, Gloria. I just want to check you can hear me clearly. That's all good. Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Dr. Einstein for that brilliant introduction, and to Vice President Outing for sharing what Lehigh University is doing. I also would like to thank the ILO office in Washington and Canada for the United States and for Canada for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. And also to congratulate all the organizers for bringing such a diversity of panelists as well, to see people of color being represented here today. So before I start off my presentation, I'm going to pose a question to you. What do you think Lizzo, music artist, and diversity and inclusion have in common? So I'll be trying to explain that today to you, and bear with me. So in the olden times, before COVID, once upon a time, we would all get up, have a shower, to have some breakfast, get ready, and go off to work. And some of us may plug in their music and listen to some music, and a certain song may come on. And I would do exactly the same. I would plug in my iPhone and listen to the following song. So that song would come on because why? Well, I felt good going to work. However, that was not always the case. At most times, certain points of my life, I felt I had to even edit or cover parts of my identity before going into work. And parts of that would result in, as Dr. Einstein pointed out, challenges in terms of my mental health as well. It reduced my productivity. I often felt myself lying and covering. Now, this is not just the case of myself as well. In fact, in the United States, according to the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, last year in 2019 alone, they received nearly 73,000 charges of workplace discrimination. And that included disability, race, sex, age, national origin, color, religion, Equal Pay Act, and the genetic information. Yet 78% of employees, according to the Harvard Business Review study, who conducted a study, found that that employees who worked at organizations that lacked diversity in leadership positions. So 78% of employees work at organizations that lack diversity in leadership positions. We know that the US population, the nation workforce, is increasingly diverse. In the last 40 years alone, between 1980 to 2020, the white working population has declined from 83% of the nation's total to 63%, while the number of minority workers has doubled. The change is based on two factors. Members of the baby boomer generation are reaching retirement age and leaving the workforce. And also younger Americans under the age of 44 are increasingly members of certain specific groups. And these younger folks are seeking out workplaces that are focused on and committed to creating workplaces that reflect the country's demographics. So why does this matter? In increasingly competitive environments, many companies need to find new methods to improve efficiency and take advantage of available resources. In today's multicultural, global, connected, and mobile world, our employers are now likely to have staff with diverse backgrounds. They come from different countries, they're different come from different cultures, speak different languages, come with different abilities, different skin colors, and they come into contact with one another. Companies with a culture of diversity and inclusion will have an easier time managing diverse work teams. Diversity means that companies with workers from different backgrounds in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, disability, HIV status, or
Hi.
sexual orientation.
Hi, just Judy Tierney here for an INR check at 12:45.
Sorry, there's, as I was saying, people come with different identity markers, and they will be in a better position to anticipate what customer diverse expectations are and what they need. Now, a changing workforce demographic is also forcing organizations to review and revise long-held beliefs and policies concerning the people who work in these organizations. Non-discriminatory practices are now becoming more increasingly recognized, or D&I, recognized as an important employer tool to increase efficiency and productivity. That was certainly the case in my time, or in my situation. Most importantly, we often hear about this business case. What is the business case between D&I and or non-discrimination? But treating workers fairly is a human right which all companies are expected to respect. Company policies and programs should recognize and value the different backgrounds of employees and seek to attract and retain, as Dr. Einstein pointed out, the best qualified workers, and place equality of opportunity at the heart of their human resources management, and, let me add, procurement processes as well throughout their supply chain. Let me just give you some quick statistics that we find. According to Glassdoor, 67% of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor for when they consider a vacancy in an employer. The Harvard Business Review study I quoted earlier found that the most diverse companies were also the most innovative, allowing them to market a great range of products to consumers. According to McKinsey, 43% of companies with diverse boards noticed higher profits. So diversity and inclusion is not just about your workforce, it goes from the CEO level down to the shop floor level, from the board level down to the shop floor level. And it's not only beneficial to have diverse employees, but management, but also diverse boards. According to the same study that McKinsey conducted, racially and ethnically diverse companies are 35% more likely to perform better and likely to outperform competitors. They also found that GDP would increase by 26% by equally diversifying the workforce. And it could lead to a global GDP by 28 trillion. So what is the ILO doing on this? And what have we done on this? There are, now the ILO, many of you may be new to the ILO, is a standard setting organization. We have numerous international labor standards addressing discrimination. Let me go to one of the most important ones. That is the 1998 ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. And it calls on or asks member states to promote fundamental principles and rights at work in their territories. And that includes non-discrimination. Most importantly, one of the key conventions here is Discrimination in Employment and Occupation, Convention 111. Then we also have another equally important convention, Equal Remuneration Convention, number 100. These conventions, in Convention 111, it identifies the discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, political opinion, national extraction, and social origin. To date, approximately 175 member states out of the 187 member states have ratified this convention. The same convention also allows member states to add additional grounds, especially I think it's under Article 2, where member states have been adding HIV, AIDS, disability, family responsibility, sexual orientation, trade union membership, or other identities under their national legislation. Convention 100 promotes the principle of equal pay for work of equal value. Now, as well as the 1998 declaration, we also have the M&E declaration. And the M&E declaration calls upon enterprises to help promote equality of opportunity and treatment in employment and occupation. Company managers and workers must review hiring and their employment practices for any basis of discrimination, which results in treating some workers or other workers less favorably because of certain identities that they hold, or they may hold multiple identities. And rather than making decisions based on a person's competencies or the inherent requirements of that job. More specifically, we have at the moment is the Equal Pay International Coalition. It's a coalition of stakeholders, academics, academia institutions, NGOs, governments, employers organizations, workers organizations, private sector, all coming together to share knowledge, best practices, tools on how to promote equal pay for work of equal value. We're also working on promoting non-discrimination through other means. We're looking to conduct research on how to produce a methodology of measuring discrimination at the national level. Following a review of studies of 14 countries, the ILO's governing body has asked us or mandated the office to look at developing a methodology on measuring racism in the workplace, or measuring race discrimination based on race. As well as that, what we also do is look at how we mainstream non-discrimination into our fundamental principles and rights at work program, looking at the root causes of child labor and forced labor. With that, I'd be happy to hand over questions, to take any questions during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nanu, for sharing the work of the ILO and the importance, I think the really important point in talking about, the fundamental rights of workers. And also when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as providing, as you mentioned, all of the statistics about, innovation and retention, but it's also, it's the right thing to do, right? It's a human right to provide non-discriminatory practices, in the workplace, not just that, as a business imperative, obviously it will be good for the bottom line of a company. So thank you to all three of our distinguished panelists. We do have a number of questions that have come in from the audience. I'd like to start with this one. And you can let me know who would like to respond. Recently, some well-known companies are misusing the push for diversity to prevent unionization and undermine workers' rights. How will Lehigh, Temple, and the ILO, with its partners, prevent management from taking advantage of these much-needed inclusive policies? Donald or Leora or Nanu, would like to provide some thoughts on that question? Give you a minute to think about it.
Well, I can't really speak to what Temple University itself will do, but I can say that I think what works in this area, look, I think we all agree that incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion is the right thing to do, right? It's from a human rights perspective. But it's been my experience is the businesses often don't move on that basis alone. And so we have to be in the habit of showing why it's in their benefit also. And so the way that I work on these issues is to show places where there is alignment between employer and employee interests. So, to say that you are using diversity as a justification for not honoring, your union contract is to say that you are ignoring workers' rights that are actually in your benefit, right? So negotiating in good faith with a union will eventually get you a loyal and productive workforce. And so we have to be talking to businesses from that perspective. It is important to bring in a diverse workforce. It is important to honor the union contract. You can do both simultaneously, and you will benefit from doing that. So that's sort of my take on it. I can't really speak to how the university itself will do it, but I'll leave that to Dr. Outing to comment on.
Well, I apologize. I cannot comment on that because I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, I appreciate the posting of the story, the Amazon story, in the chat box, referencing this, because we aren't a unionized institution. It's not something that I have spent any real time thinking about, but I'm going to apologize and pass on trying to attempt to answer that question.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. We have another question, and it states, the push for LGBTQ rights has been a long and contested area in our political landscape. Recently, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, during her confirmation hearings for the U.S. Supreme Court Justice, said she has never and would never discriminate on the basis of sexual preference. Why is it incorrect and alarming to use the term sexual preference for LGBTQ people?
Would you like me to answer that? I'd be happy to answer that. I think, no, I'm not going to comment on what the Supreme Court nominee has said, but I will comment on what the United Nations has said in terms of the terminology on sexual preference versus choice behavior. What the United Nations has said, there's a lot of debate around nature and nurture on sexual orientation, whether it comes from a nurture perspective or a nature perspective, i.e., is it something that happens around environment or is it biological? Now, the United Nations has said that regardless of how it's formed, that sexual orientation is an innate human right and a part of all of us, as we all hold a sexual orientation. The other side of orientation, and the word use of orientation, is that it's a relationship to someone versus as it's an external looking. Whereas sexual preference, according to the terminology that is being shared in the United Nations system, looks at sexual preference as looking at specific attributes of the person that you are attracted to, be they physical or behavioral.
Thank you, Nanu. Next question, Dr. Outing, can you talk a little bit about how your role as a Chief Diversity Officer has changed in the push toward advancing an anti-racism agenda?
Yeah, I sort of captured a little bit of that in my opening statement. I think a number of what people call chief diversity officers, I prefer to refer to myself as the university diversity officer or senior diversity officer within the institution. But how that has changed dramatically in the last month has to do around this issue of a systemic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will say the majority of the work, the bulk of my portfolio, I'll speak for self, the bulk of my portfolio, as I look back, has to do with very tactical, very transactional approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion, standing up a fund to support groups of people, standing up a center to enable underrepresented groups, very transactional and focus on the individual to make the individuals feel comfortable within an environment that has had little interest of changing or its culture or its processes or its policies or procedures. So we did a lot of working around, if you will, the current environment. The big change has come in the form of now there's this demand, both internally and externally, that institutions like Lehigh universities and other higher ed organizations began to look at themselves, begin to look at the institution, to begin to look at the artifacts that we say represent the values of the institution, the policies, the processes and procedures, and reimagine, deconstruct, if you will, some of those processes, and reimagining one where there are no barriers for a minoritized person, for a woman within a particular culture. And so that's a lot. That's not easy. And that requires the ability to have very uncomfortable conversations with people as you're moving an institution, transforming an institution, its culture, and what it believes in. So that's been the big change.
Thank you so much, Dr. Outing. I think we have maybe time for one more question. Here's a question from Peg in the audience. It says, in a recent best-selling book, Diversity, Inc. by Pamela Newkirk, she criticizes diversity programs at universities and companies as being profoundly misguided and have done little to bring equality to America's major industries and institutions. Can the panelists provide policy suggestions that are measurable and how we can hold companies to account?
I can start on that one.
All right.
I think that companies that have been working on diversity for decades, and there are plenty, usually have systems in place to recruit better. That has been the focus, right? Numbers, demographics, which is important. Absolutely important, right? As Gurchattan mentioned, right, the numbers and the diversification of boards and C-suites and all of that is important, but it's not an end in and of itself. And these companies have affinity groups, and sometimes they have chief diversity officers, but many of them have not meaningfully integrated these ideas into the culture at large. And I think that's the problem. So they focus on numbers only, and then when they start to decide, okay, it's time, right? They suddenly push trainings and re-education, right? And they haven't contemplated whether their workforce is ready, is prepped for this kind of training. And you have to prep it to introduce it strategically. You can't just shove it at people because they will get defensive and won't take it in, right? And so I think starting with a climate survey, first figuring out where your workforce is, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? What's going on? How do people currently feel before you start to make changes? And then really important to begin DEI efforts at the top. Senior management has to set the tone for workplace culture because no amount of training can overcome a culture that is indifferent to it if that's the message that senior management is conveying, right? There is a trickle-down effect, and every decision trickles down from that tone that senior management is setting. So whether FaceTime matters, whether caregiving means you're a less valued employee, whether promotions are given only to people who look like the person promoting them, right? All of those, small daily decisions are coming from senior management's tone. So I think no amount of training, no amount of change can work unless there is buy-in at the top. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leora. I know that we wanted to give each of the panelists an opportunity to have some parting thoughts, but I think I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Post to close us out. And thanks to all of my wonderful panelists.
Well, first of all, thank you. This was extremely stimulating, and hearing these three speakers and panelists one after the other really made me see how how our different work interrelates, right? We heard from Professor Leora Eisenstadt about the connection and the need for business leaders to understand how this connects to the bottom line, and indeed it does, as a way of, and helping people understand how to have these conversations on a day-to-day basis. We also heard from Dr. Donald Outing about the systems-based and the systemic approach to managing this. And the reality is as we try to change the systems, we're still also within them, right? So these two levels work together, understanding how we create the right environment for the employees we have, and also at the same time, look at the systems. And then it was also absolutely fascinating to hear Mr. Gachachan Sandhu talk about what the ILO is doing at a country level and trying to get firms on board. Each country has a different history as it relates to diversity and the trajectory of its workforce and demographics. So that's another layer in which we as individuals and our systems operate. So hearing those 3 points together was really stimulating. So I want to thank all three of our panelists, and I want to thank Ms. Gloria Blackwell as well for her most excellent moderation. And this concludes then our Lehigh University and ILO panel discussion on diversity and inclusion of business advantage. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay well.